Water was gushing across the floor, soaking the furniture she loved, and for the first time in years, Lena realized just how alone she really was. Every call for help seemed to echo back with silence. Every effort to fix things had failed, until a stranger showed up, a plumber, a single dad, someone who, without even knowing it, was about to change her entire life. The water had already soaked into the floorboards by the time she realized how alone she truly was. It wasn't just a broken pipe flooding her small house in the gray early hours of the morning. It was the quiet panic rising in her chest, the kind that comes when you reach for help and remember there is no one left to call. As the water crept closer to the old sofa where she had once laughed with someone she loved, she stood frozen, barefoot on cold tiles, wondering how her life had narrowed to this single moment of helplessness. She had no idea that a simple phone call to a plumber would become the turning point of her entire existence. Before the story truly begins, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen in ordinary lives. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Her name was Lena, and at 34, she had mastered the art of appearing strong while quietly unraveling inside. The house she lived in was modest, with peeling paint on the porch and a roof that complained every time it rained. It had once been filled with plans and shared dreams, but now it echoed with absence. Lena worked long hours at a local design firm, her creativity keeping her afloat while her personal life felt stuck in an endless winter. Loss had shaped her days, first when her marriage ended, not with anger, but with exhaustion, and then when her mother passed away, leaving behind silence where laughter once lived. This house had been her mother's, and keeping it had felt like holding on to the last thread of family she had left. The broken pipe was not just another problem, it was the final straw in a long list of things that had gone wrong. Lena had delayed repairs for months, telling herself she could handle it later, that she was managing just fine. But life had a way of exposing the cracks when you least expected it. As she scrambled to shut off the water, her hands shaking, she felt the weight of every moment she had pretended to be okay. When she finally found the emergency number taped inside a kitchen drawer, she hesitated, staring at it as if it might judge her for calling so early. When the plumber arrived, the sky was still heavy with clouds, and the street was quiet in that way that makes everything feel more dramatic than it is. He stepped out of an old van, its paint faded but clean, with a small toolbox in one hand and a small backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from responsibility rather than lack of sleep, yet there was something steady about him. He introduced himself simply, moving with calm efficiency, as if broken pipes and flooded floors were just another part of life he knew how to handle. What Lena noticed first was not his skill or the way he immediately assessed the damage, it was the gentleness in his movements. He didn't rush, didn't make her feel foolish for waiting too long, didn't overwhelm her with technical language. As he worked, the house seemed to breathe again, as if relieved that someone competent had finally stepped inside. Lena found herself sitting on the edge of the stairs, watching him from a distance, feeling an unfamiliar sense of safety. The man was named Daniel, a single father to a 7-year-old daughter who spent most mornings waiting for him at a neighbor's house while he took early calls like this one. His life revolved around routines, school lunches, bedtime stories, and the quiet determination to provide stability where life had taken so much away. He had lost his wife years earlier, and the grief had reshaped him into someone both cautious and deeply compassionate. Fixing things had become more than a job. It was how he made sense of a world that had once fallen apart. As the water receded and the problem came under control, Lena felt something shift inside her. It wasn't attraction in the traditional sense, nor was it sudden hope. It was recognition. She saw in Daniel a reflection of her own quiet endurance, the way he carried responsibility without complaint. They spoke in simple terms about the damage, about what needed replacing, about the weather and the age of the house. Yet beneath those ordinary words was an unspoken understanding that both of them had survived storms no one else could see. Days passed, and Lena returned to her routines, but something lingered. The house no longer felt quite as heavy. She noticed small things differently, the way sunlight filtered through the living room in the afternoon, the sound of her own breathing when she sat still. When another issue came up weeks later, she didn't hesitate to call the same number. Daniel returned, and this time the familiarity felt comforting rather than intrusive. Over the following months, their lives began to overlap in subtle ways. Daniel would mention his daughter's school projects in passing, and Lena would find herself smiling at the thought of a child's laughter filling his evenings. Lena shared pieces of her work, her love for art, and the way creativity had been both her escape and her anchor. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions. Instead, there were shared cups of coffee, quiet conversations standing in doorways, and the slow building of trust.
Lena's struggles didn't disappear. She still faced deadlines, bills, and moments when grief resurfaced without warning. But now, when something went wrong, she didn't feel completely alone. Daniel, too, carried his own burdens, the constant worry of being enough for his daughter, the fear of letting someone close only to lose them again. Yet in Lena's presence, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years, as if his life didn't have to be defined solely by responsibility. The turning point came one evening when the power went out during a storm. Lena sat in darkness, the wind rattling the windows, memories flooding back of nights spent alone after her mother's passing. Without thinking too much, she called Daniel, not for repairs, but because she needed to hear a familiar voice. He came over with a flashlight and a spare generator, but more importantly, he brought reassurance. The storm passed, but the moment stayed with both of them, marking the realization that their connection had grown into something deeper. As time went on, Lena found herself invited into Daniel's world. She met his daughter, a bright, curious child who looked at her with cautious interest before warming up with the easy trust of youth. Lena felt something soften inside her, a place she had kept closed since losing her own family. Being around them reminded her of the warmth she thought she had lost forever. Slowly, the house that once felt empty began to feel like a place where new memories could be made. Daniel, too, changed. He allowed himself to dream again, not of replacing what he had lost, but of building something new. Lena's presence gave him permission to imagine a future that included joy alongside responsibility. They supported each other through setbacks, celebrated small victories, and learned that healing did not mean forgetting the past, but honoring it while moving forward. The transformation was not sudden or dramatic. It was gradual, like the way light returns after a long night. Lena's confidence grew, her work flourished, and she began to see herself not as someone surviving, but as someone living. Daniel found balance, learning that strength could coexist with vulnerability. Together, they created a space where kindness was not an exception, but a foundation. Years later, Lena would look back on that flooded morning as the beginning of everything. What started as a practical need had become the doorway to a life she never expected. The plumber who showed up that day had fixed more than pipes. He had restored her faith in connection, in the idea that help could arrive in the most ordinary forms. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment near the end to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps keep these meaningful stories alive and reaching others who may need hope. Just before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel, whether it's hope, warmth, healing, or something else entirely. In the end, Lena learned that life doesn't always announce its turning points with fanfare. Sometimes it comes disguised as a problem, a broken pipe, a moment of vulnerability. And sometimes the person who changes your life arrives not with promises, but with quiet competence and a kind heart. The house that once echoed with loss now held laughter, shared meals, and the comforting knowledge that she was no longer facing the world alone. And for those who believe in kindness and second chances, this was proof that even the smallest acts can lead to the most profound transformations.